Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining us today for our, what month is it? October Working Parent Network meeting. We're very glad to have Dr. Katie Penry with us today. Katie and I are college friends, and so I'm so happy to have her share about her amazing work, the Parenting Toddlers Workbook. Katie, if you don't mind, I'm going to read just a little bit of the introduction before I turn it over to you, and this is going to be a very informal conversation. Feel free if you would like to share a question in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that. Katie, we'll just turn it over to you here in a moment for some more introductions. And then again, I think as you were sharing before we started the recording, just really kind of talking into how things are going for folks right now is probably going to be the best way that we use our time for today. So in Katie's introduction, this really just jumped off the page for me, and I want to share what she says. Unfair and unnecessary judgment can consume parenthood. According to 0 to 3's 2015 National Parent Survey, 9 out of 10 parents across all economic, gender, and racial segments say that they feel unfairly judged. Strangers in the community, the top of the list of perpetrators, followed closely by, drumroll, my in-laws. 9 out of 10 is a startling number. It means that 90% of my readers are coming to this book with a measure of pain. Hoping I won't be yet another stranger who listens poorly, judges unfairly, and leaves a trail of shaming commentary in my wake. So she lays out then her core beliefs for this book and her work. 1, parents are the most powerful agents of change in the world. Number 2, your child is resilient, and I will add, so are we as parents. Number 3, perfection isn't the goal. And number 4, parents deserve accurate information. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage before turning it over to Katie. And Katie, thank you so much for your time. It's so great, as we have been friends for a long time and followed one another on social media. I've loved to see your work blossom, and just very grateful for you and your time today. So Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So like she says, my name is Katie Penry. I am author of the book, The Parenting Toddlers Workbook. It's a really practical book. Like I say, it almost is a cookbook approach to parenting, managing your child's moods, well-being, and potential. And it's just, it's a work of love, and like hopefully what this talk will be, it's just very practical. I was continuing to encounter in my work with parents an expertise that was kind of over intellectual and kind of hard to apply. And so we are just, I'm going to surmount some of that. I'm trying to change my views so that I can see somebody. Oh, everybody just got pictures. Okay, so let me tell you a short story really quickly. I live on the Gulf Coast of Alabama, on the little bay that is in Alabama. And about 3 weeks ago, we got hit by a hurricane, Hurricane Sally. I didn't have power for weeks. I didn't have power for about a week. I didn't have internet for weeks, and we are still recovering and still digging out. That's why I look like this, and I'm wearing a t-shirt. And before I got on, I actually had on a hat, because I am still in the process, you guys, of like moving trees out of my yard. It has been quite a nightmare. So anyway, that is where I am today, and this is why I kind of look like this. But still, I didn't want to cancel, because I love doing this kind of stuff, and it was just going to be a really lovely reprieve to be with y'all. The way I would really like to structure our time together is to dive right into kind of what Faith, before we started, we were just kind of informally chatting about eliciting some questions about what this has been like for you, and what are some of the major problems, discipline questions that you may have, child well-being questions that you may have, and that we can kind of start diving in together. I love chatting one-on-one in a group with people, kind of letting others bear witness to the parenting consultation as it happens, because I find that so often the struggle of one really is the struggle of many whenever it comes to parenting. So Faith said that she's going to be monitoring the chat box. So if you would, please submit questions. And then whenever we choose your question and we start talking about, I cannot see the chat box. So Faith, I'm going to depend on you for that. And then once we start going, you'll unmute. If I choose your question, or whenever Faith offers your question, you'll just unmute and we can talk tete-a-tete here in front of everybody, and we can start to kind of go from there. I am really curious how, I know how, let's see, kind of loaded the term work-life balance is. And I'm interested to hear thoughts about it and to hear how it's going being at home full time with child. One thing that keeps coming up for me whenever I do these chats or do presentations, I can do a big, beautiful presentation. And at the end of that presentation, the same question is always asked, which is mostly about boundaries, because the way we're having to create and express boundaries has really changed. Now that we, especially during quarantine, now that we're kind of on top of each other, and for some of you, parks might still be closed. I don't know. So does anybody have any questions? Let's start with that. Let's start there.
Yeah, so as Katie said, feel free to put your questions in the chat box, or if you want to unmute yourself again, you're welcome to do that. I think we have a small enough group here with about 16 of us on the call. I will share just a little bit about what I was sharing before we started the official meeting, was just this kind of division of childcare, work time, and not work time. And just to share some context, I have a 4.5-year-old and a 17-month-old at home. We have grandparents who help care for them, and so they're going to grandparents a few days during the work week, just so that we can manage things, because it is very taxing. So I know that, just Katie, for your reference, in Kentucky, most of our schools right now are still doing virtual learning. That is shifting, and I don't know how many of you here today have school-age children, but just that navigating of balance and boundaries, as you said. The 4.5-year-old doesn't really do a lot of naps. She's starting to phase out of that nap phase, which is so lovely to get things done, right? And the 17-month-old transitioning to 1 nap. So really that's kind of where I'm at, just in kind of that whole navigating boundaries. My schedule really looks like I have a great supportive supervisor, as far as kind of doing a little bit of a swing shift in some ways, and then I do a couple hours of work super early in the morning. And then I do have a student-facing position, so I'm meeting with students during the day. And as I mentioned, I really compress that to the days that my kiddos start with their grandparents. So that's just a little bit of where I'm at. Again, I know that there are other folks here who might have similar questions or thoughts that you might want to kind of dig through. So that's where I'm at. If you want to share some of your own situations that you might want to present for Katie, for us to kind of talk through, like she said, I think for us to have those one-on-ones and then kind of bear witness to what everyone else is going through is always really beneficial.
So Faith, are you working with, are you, every time that you're working, the kids are out of the house?
Not every time. So I do have, my office is in my closet, which I'm grateful. I'm at my kitchen table right now because, as I mentioned, I'm also cooking lunch. So I'm very grateful. Both my husband and I are working from home, and we both work at UK. So we both have our own separate dedicated spaces. It's still challenging. Yesterday we're still trying to work, again, capitalizing on those nap times. And, my husband's in a meeting, and I know my 4.5-year-old is just all about daddy right now. So she's constantly up, and I'm like really stressed out about that because I know that that's his focus time. It's just hard to navigate that.
Yeah, it is. Boundaries during this time are such an expression of self-love and other love. And I think that sometimes parents can have a really hard time getting into that mindset where, in order for us to be, I really like how you have arranged your time and how you have arranged your childcare, because it sounds like you really are saying, I have to have this very clear boundary so that whenever I'm with my child, my directives and the things that I'm trying to accomplish whenever I'm with them, or even the things that I'm not trying to accomplish, the kind of openness and the free time and the free play can kind of happen. For me personally, free play is always challenged by working at home, because those boundaries seem to be, at first, were the most permeable. And so I would let the boundaries around play collapse and let work kind of encroach. And so that is the way that you're doing that seems so wise. And that's eventually, how I had to learn to kind of get them out so that I could really be focused. Let's see. David said something. I wish I could see the chat. What's happening in the chat, Faith?
Yeah, absolutely. So, David, your question, or the thought about the term balance being this equal weight time distribution on either side of the scale. And I think, we all have seen that, that word balance is maybe misleading. And so there's, the time spent on work and child supervision is not equal to what we need to focus on work. And so it does leave that feeling of inadequacy. David, do you want to just unmute and chime in? Anything I might have missed?
Yeah, let's hear it, David. Where are you? There you are, David.
I think that last bit I might have broken up a little bit, but I think you said it very well, Faith. I think the term itself can be misleading, I think, in some ways. And as a parent, especially now in the COVID restrictions, just having to work at home, you will hear my two children in the background. My wife has gone to a family emergency, so it becomes this overwhelming, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, these kids need this. I've got to get these deadlines done. But in the scheme of things, it's easy for me to stop and say, you know what? Kids are more important. I need to do more for the family piece than for my work piece. But at the same time, when you're missing deadlines, that can be detrimental as well. And so I think sometimes just the term itself can lead to this inadequate feeling of like, man, I don't know how to do this well, when I don't know if it ever really was supposed to be fairly balanced to begin with. I don't know.
Right. And also normalizing a feeling, for me, 2020, normalizing a feeling of disequilibrium, that things really just aren't balanced, and that to enter into, I don't know how many people here are like psychologists or studying to be psychologists, but kind of using some of that mindfulness-based therapy actually with in this, and like in having that acceptance, and just like accepting and committing to the disequilibrium, and that the feelings of unbalance kind of come and that they pass through me, and that whenever I just accept it and try and take a non-judgmental stance on the fact that that when my boundaries feel very permeable and like very encroached upon, that these things come and that they pass, and that to me, the most destructive part of the conversation about work-life balance is the way it's kind of wrapped up in a package. Like, once you figure it out, it's like perfect, and things are always very balanced, and there is a code that you can crack. And my 2020 has been about accepting that there is no magic formula that I just haven't figured out yet. Things just happen, plans collapse, boundaries collapse, and I accept and move on. And that actually helps me too in the repair process with my children, kind of coming back together. In fact, I don't know if this would be a helpful conversation. Sometimes it is about rupture and repair. Let's see. It took my husband and I can click on the link. It took my husband a while to figure out how to communicate with each other during quarantine, to know what we needed to say to each other, to have what we needed professionally, or to care for our son. There wasn't and still isn't enough personal time, but I tried to work out. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. And just kind of letting the fact that we are all a work in progress kind of happen to us. And do you know, that is just so applicable to for those of you who are in psychology. I feel that so many of us are having a parallel process with our children who are also in a constant state of evolution and learning. And we too are in a state of evolution and learning. And so we're in that with them. And that has been really a compassionate and empathic kind of expansive experience for me personally, to be so in the depths of that kind of helpless feeling that kind of comes with childhood. Does that make sense? It's interesting. So what I was going to say before I went on that little rant, though, was about the rupture repair process that happens. In my book, I talk a lot about rupture and repair. And about how, and I think that that conversation has been really applicable too during COVID, during quarantine, as our kids, as collapses continue to happen and tempers continue to kind of flare. I'm wondering if you guys have dealt with any of that, if with like more temperamental children that bite more, that fight more, that tantrum more, or if spouses that bite more and tantrum more, or your own ego, your own self. How's that going for you guys?
Let's see, I think Stephanie, did you have your hand raised? Did you raise your hand a moment ago?
Oh, I did. Although I think the topic has now passed,
Okay,
but that's
got it.
fine.
That's okay. Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, no, that's okay. I mean, I'll speak to what you were just asking about, which, I can say actually that I think one godsend that we've experienced is that with both my husband and I working at home, it allowed us to do some of that early COVID kind of tag team management, I think a little bit more fluidly than we would have if one of us was still like fully in the office. And so that ended up being helpful. And I think, for us, it was like being in each other's space all the time maybe made us more mindful about being careful to not bite and tantrum, right? Because we have enough of that happening with our kids and like, right, like life just felt that way during early COVID. So it was like, all right, let's not add to it. So anyhow, that was our experience with that. And I think I'm reading in the chat, like another participant commented on like the fact that kids' needs are always changing. So like for us, COVID was happening right around the time our son turned 1. So he walked, right? He crawled and walked and now runs everywhere while he was home with us. And it went from changing for us to be able to like, have him in the playpen for an hour or two at a time with him being like kind of immobile to like us having to chase him around the house and, reel him in from the putting things in the toilet while we were on Zoom calls and stuff like that. So, I'm definitely sympathetic to parents who are dealing with that now.
Yeah, there is nothing static about COVID and about this process. There's been nothing static. As soon as you reach equilibrium, and somebody else just said, their child was 14 months and now is 21 months. Woo! There is so much changing in there. And another thing that I talk a lot about in my book is tantruming, and how creating a lot of times parents really have a hard time with the empathy of tantrums. Like, and they view tantrums as a discipline and mood issue rather than a neurological experience. For us who have the neurology and we're better able to handle the influx, the disequilibrium, the lack of static, of the constant change, for a child, they really don't have the neurology quite there to deal with that. And so here they have this change that is occurring maybe to their body. It's interesting you said about walking. Okay, so even that is for children a really interesting neurological experience, because it's one not of motor coordination, although it's one of motor coordination, but also of independence, becoming increasingly independent. And sometimes you will see even children, walking is one of those things that you can kind of and toileting, these areas of regression, because the experience is so very broad for them. And whenever we see tantrums, we see kind of this trying to integrate all of these new and kind of burgeoning moving pieces. And so we too are experiencing that now in COVID. And one of the things that I see a lot in my office now with my like parenting consults or the clients that I have, we've been working through behavioral problems and stuff like that, is a real growth in parental empathy as they deal with that feeling of angst and that feeling of like disintegration. I'm needing to yell, I'm needing to run, I'm needing to be in my body in a different way now. And that they're kind of trying to cope with that too, and kind of realizing that that is the neurological experience of the tantrum, Let's see what else is happening in the chat. It's amazing how much he's grown and developed. Okay. Yeah. having more involvement in the process, but also can stress and can be overwhelming when we're trying to be caregivers and we want to be, and the professionals we want to be. Oh yeah, so true. So true. I wonder if anybody, right, in regards to children tantruming, that they left school and their friends one day with no prior notice and experienced complete disruption to their schedules, and most adults would lack the coping skills required to deal with that. Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Any suggestions on how to redirect my 14 months old tantrums that involve smacking or throwing things? Sometimes it comes from being frustrated with inability to communicate, and sometimes from being tired before bedtime, and we're trying to empathize. But the smacking and throwing things we'd like to redirect. Yes, absolutely. That's such a great point, because destructive expressions of disintegration are much harder for parents to tolerate. A lot of kids will bite, to hit, and kind of be aggressive. And I know that is, I don't know if anybody else is struggling with that. Yeah. So let's talk about that. One thing that I talk about in my book, and this is a great place to start, is that tantrums are a neurological issue and not a discipline issue. That's a great place to start. Is that as this child is kind of coming undone, holding themselves together gets much harder. I like that you said sometimes these tantrums, sometimes they're just happening at night. I always say halt, right? Is my child hungry? Is my child angry? Are they lonely? Are they tired? Sometimes, especially whenever you have a toddler, which toddlers are my area of expertise, you can almost look at yourself as a parent as kind of a trainer to an endurance athlete. I use halt often with myself, says Faith in the chat. Yeah, like, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Am I tired? Yeah. And I actually think that is from AA? Isn't that something that addicts use as well? That they always say, wait a second, because I have to kind of take care of myself. They say I have to take care of myself in new ways. But anyway, so with the child, you're looking at it like I'm a trainer of this endurance athlete. And whenever they are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, disintegration, it happens a lot easier. It's a lot harder for them to hold and process all of the changes that are happening in their life. And some of those changes include, like I said, independence. Some of it includes desire, like integrating that they have skills, they have motor skills, and now they also have desires. And how can and then that they also have boundaries, that all of these things are coming, and learning these things are very difficult. And so sometimes they will hit and scream. Generally, whenever the tantrum occurs, I recommend ignoring, like stepping over or taking an empathic response. It's very different from a discipline issue. I'm trying to think of a good discipline issue. Maybe y'all can think of one. I'm drawing a blank for some reason, and I feel like discipline issues are what I do for a living. But anyway, isn't that how it works? Where with discipline, and I feel like biting is kind of the gray area of a tantrum meets discipline. It's like whenever we're biting, hitting, hurting. So I'm going to say that you're going to treat that kind of like a discipline issue, but with empathy, with the empathy of a tantrum address and the kind of boundaries of a discipline issue. So whenever I say empathy of addressing tantrum, empathy always first. So we're always connecting, and we're saying like, this is hard. You can't color on the walls. And oh my gosh, I remember learning that I have to color just on this piece of paper. And that was a lot for me too. I'm so sorry. Or sometimes if your child isn't even that verbal, don't worry about it. Like, still say the words, like still use verbal connection. And because to me, it helps me redirect my own body and come into a posture of empathy. Like, oh my goodness, like where I kind of like collapse into a kind of connection with a young child. We're making ourselves much smaller, and we're managing our face like I'm doing now. And we're always kind of aware whenever a tantrum happens that like, something neurological is happening. And so that animal brain is triggered. So we respond with animal instinct. And we're making ourselves much smaller, we're lowering our voice, and we're connecting with that posture of empathy. So always start there, and then just understand that, goodness, this is hard. And people say, never use timeouts. If you're really having a hard time coming into a posture of empathy, a voice of empathy, a face of empathy, or even just the mindset of empathy, then use a timeout and say, let's just, let's come back to this, or I need to come back to this, and if you are going to use that, like, it helps to pre-establish that, like with your kid, to know where they're going to time out. So they think about it like, this is a place for both of us to kind of calm. Now, sometimes your children really do need you to calm. And what's the famous saying? They don't need your chaos, they need your calm. They don't need more chaos, because a tantrum, and you can see it on an MRI, guys. Oh, wait, did I drop you? No. Okay. Sorry, I got a phone call. I don't know what happens whenever I get a phone call.
Your video just muted for a second, but I think you're still here. Oh, did we lose her? I think we might have lost Katie for a moment. I'm sure she'll be back. Oh, there she is.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay,
You're back.
Great. So anyway, so we're using the, with the biting during tantrum, we're still using all of the empathy, but you always stop, and then you redirect, and then you praise. Okay. So you're going to try and incorporate a stopping, the redirecting, and the praising. And here's what I mean by that. Sometimes whenever kids bite, that's a very threatening, obviously, behavior for parents. We don't want our kids to be sociopaths. And it doesn't matter how great of a developmental psychologist you are, you still your brain pops into, oh my gosh, prison, like this kid is going to jail, like, or something, like they're going to be a sociopath because they're biting and they're hitting. And so you kind of like drop out of empathy, and you get into doing what? Over explaining, using logic, asking why, maybe even using force, which I never recommend. Force makes force. So don't ever do that. But really what you need to do is just very simple. Stop the behavior, get them doing a more appropriate behavior, and then praise that behavior, especially in the middle of a tantrum, guys. And especially with toddlers, you're over explaining, you're asking, why are you doing that? And as sweet as it is, I see a lot of parents like interrupting play, taking the child out, asking why, saying we don't hit, hitting hurts. All of that's good to say, but it needs to be very quick. You don't need to take the child out of the play. It needs to, in most cases, it's a simple like, don't hit, hitting hurts. Getting some blocks, redirecting. You're playing together so sweetly now. My goodness, I love it when you play together in this way. So it's just a stop and a redirect and a hitting. Now, I mean, to stop the hitting, whenever the tantrum is happening, sometimes even that, like if the hitting is happening outside of play, but in the context of a tantrum, really your job, mama and daddy, is to be calm and to help that child find calm, to let them borrow your frontal lobe. Okay. So if they don't stop and you have to physically restrain them, like hold their hands, like, oh my goodness, I cannot let you hit. I cannot let you hit even whenever we feel big anger. I cannot. So it's fine. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to hold you until you can stop yourself. Okay. It's just, we stop. Sometimes you like, I like that, right? Like letting them borrow your frontal lobe, letting them borrow your strength, letting them borrow your self-restraint. Don't give them your chaos. Don't try as hard as you can to not jump all the way to the electric chair and, oh my God, they're hitting and now you're in chaos rather than just
great.
Giving
That's
them
great,
some
Katie.
calm.
There are a couple of things in the comments that relate a little bit to this about kind of how to do time out when your kiddos might want to really stay connected to you. And
Yes.
I know part of like time in. So it's,
Yes, love it.
why don't you come sit with me on the couch
Yes.
and we're going to sit together really closely.
Yes.
Speak any to that, Katie?
Yes, I absolutely love a time in. So I use, I've really been oh no, come on, don't do it. Don't kick me out. I did it. I survived the phone call, everybody. Okay, so with, I've been with the time in, that is like so great, especially in the midst of a tantrum, because you're using yourself, you're using your frontal lobe, you're using your calm. And listen, guys, we're talking neurological connections, we are talking brain pathways. And if they learn that in the context of you and your calm, they're still learning it. And in fact, the research is very clear here that children who are comforted in the middle of chaos rather than isolated actually learn self-calming quicker. Okay. So this idea of I'm going to send them away so that they can learn this behavior is not appropriate. Whenever you're in a disintegrated brain or a lizard brain and a downstairs brain, that learning actually is not happening. They need you to be functioning on that level too. So we're talking about just like human to human vibration and connection, and like, I'm giving you some calm. My words are not happening. Learning is not happening except on a neurological brain pathway. So the quicker that you can kind of instill your calm, and I like a time in. Now, quarantine is hard. And you guys, we adults are not like, a lot of us bring our own trauma, our own parental like ruptures, like in our primary relationships, and we're bringing that into quarantine, and we're bringing that into a trapped environment with our children. And so I also like a timeout, and that isn't for the child, that's for the parent. That is for the parent, because sometimes we do need a little bit of space to know that I've been triggered, and to recall what triggered you, to reflect on what triggered you, so that you can reconnect and so that you can respond appropriately. And if you're going to do that, I really recommend talking to your kid about it ahead of time. Like, my primary goal in life is to stay connected to you. And so but sometimes we have to disconnect for a few minutes so that I can do that well. Here's what we're going to do, and here's my signal word, and here's how we're going to do it. And I hope that I can give you alone time when you need it, and whenever I need it to take a big deep breath. I hope that you can give it to me. I know that that's hard. But I still love you. So offer that connection and that love. I love you so much. I got to take a breather, sister, because I'm about to lose my mind. That's usually how it works with me. I'm in like this, like, honestly, sister, if you talk, I got to go. Hold on one second. That's how, and then I can kind of just take a breather. I recall what happened. I recalled what triggered me. I reflect on how I interacted with the kid, and I make a plan for reconnection. And then I make that reconnection happen in a more appropriate response. So yeah, tantrums and time ins are all good. Timeouts. I know that psychologists come down hard on timeouts, but I'm wondering if that literature is going to change as we deal with more compact spaces and parenting in compact spaces. So
Katie, I know there's it sounds like a lot of the chatter in the chats really kind of around some of these same things. I know we've got about 20 minutes of our time left, so I want to be mindful of that for folks. And this made me think a little bit about your work on looking up and in quarantine. I know that in the very beginning, it was like, oh, screen time is so challenging for us right now. And now it's continuing to be challenging. And then I find myself at the end of the day, like I'm just tapped out. And so not just kiddos, but screen time for parents, which you address in the book as well. So just curious if you can maybe share some of your thoughts and work on that.
Yeah. Okay. So for the people who don't know me and aren't familiar with my work, I kind of initially came onto this scene with this thing called the Lookup Challenge. And basically it was trying to integrate, for those of you who are psychologists in here, some of Ed Tronick's work about the still face of the parent, and the way that and now Tronick's work, as y'all know, is mostly around depression, the postpartum depressed mother. And his research is about the way a child, like how ego development happens and how relationality develops in the context of a parent's facial expression, and what happens to the child whenever the mother or the father is flatter and less responsive. That kind of happens with depression. Hold on one second, you guys. I have, these are my employees that keep busting in. So I'm going to go get my business partner and have them call them. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay.
No problem, Katie.
They're like calling back to back to back.
That's okay. So as she's stepping away for just a minute, I wanted to kind of have her talk a little bit about this, coming off of this idea of the time in. Because I think sometimes, again, when we're balancing, using that word extremely loosely, when we are balancing, work from home, and typically I do not have my email on my phone, but now I'm not at my computer from 8 to 5. So sometimes I have to have my email on my phone. And so that's where some of this kind of coming in from this topic of like time in, but then also with screens, that's kind of where I wanted Katie to maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So the Lookup Challenge in my work around screen time is actually parental screen time. So that's where I was going with that. It's basically my work is about how a child's relationality, their development of empathy, their responsivity, and the way that their ability to integrate and stay connected is affected whenever the parent imagine that this is a phone, is kind of like this all the time, whenever this is a real barrier. The phone is a real barrier to the way the infant and the toddler learns about humanity, their face, and like this, because what we know is that the infant really begins learning about self in the context of the mother's eyes. Isn't that amazing? And so how do we create balance there? So I just am not an advocate for the flip phone. I'm not an advocate for going back and like getting rid of all internet use during, whenever you're parenting. But I do think that we do need to continue to develop better tools to address phone addiction in the context of infant and toddler parenting. Not necessarily even the child. I mean, I understand that the child is needing, I don't know, and maybe somebody out there who's a little bit closer to the research, because like I say, I have been really busy for the past several months, like obviously COVID, and then I had this book come out, and then now the hurricane. But I'm sure that they're starting to get more research about actual impact of child screen time. Is everything okay? What's wrong? Okay. All right. You guys, I got a lot of plates in the air. I think that the research is actually not nearly as damning as it was about like the child's use of a screen. But I think that there is less research. You know why? And researchers don't want to do the research because they don't want to put their phone down either. But I think that we do need to just be aware. And that would be my response to you. I know that that's not a great answer, Faith, is that I'm learning too. And all I can tell you is just like continue to be aware that like your face really matters. Your gaze really matters. So, what I've started trying to do personally is like, well, like, I mean, I got a business partner with me outside, for instance, who she ain't too far away. Okay. But that's how I was going to be able to be with you and look at you in your face, Faith, even and like give you myself, because I know that I have somebody else out here that is listening. And so coordinating those things with your bosses, coordinating those things with your business partners, with your spouses, so that you can have times where you are phone free, where your boss knows, like, my kid needs my face from 3 until 6 every night. And I can't give you my ear because my kid needs my face. And so, negotiating these things, and whether it's that or some other time or some other way, but like floor time, your phone doesn't need to be near you during floor time. Now, don't go back to a flip phone. Don't stop it altogether. But floor time is huge. Breastfeeding is huge. Feeding time is big. Like, honestly, the things that are happening inside your kid's head during those times is like, don't mess with them by bringing a phone in. Try and stay really present. Just like, I think, Faith, and you and I maybe have talked about this before, I'm a big advocate for really setting up boundaries around activities. So that, like, whenever you're feeding, whenever you're on the floor, like, those are phone-free times. But like, whenever your kid is free playing without you and you're sitting on the chair, like, check Twitter. It's funny and it keeps us sane, It's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think I heard recently something is like, look at the differences between what you're glancing at and where your gaze is. So when you said that, make
Yes.
kids have your gaze, like, obviously that's where I want my kids to be, right?
Yes.
I want them to have my gaze, but there are times I might need to glance at the through, but I'm going to glance at it and file that away for after bedtime or early tomorrow morning, when I'm then going to be able to address it. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't like sit with us, right? So, but I think it's just that distinction of when you are on the floor playing, that you're really truly engaged
Engaged and like
engaged.
And I really like you need to have times where you're not even glancing. Like, that really does matter. I would say, I think I've told you this before. One of the things that I did whenever I was trying to get better about, like, more aware, is that I would announce, like, some royal while I'm looking at my phone. I'd be like, and I'm checking my email or whatever. And I did that for so long that now, like, if I'm looking at my phone when my kids don't think I should be looking at my phone, like, they're going to tell me. And that helps me manage the length of my, quote, glance, because I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but my glance turns into like, oh, now I'm in a deep hole and I'm talking about Meghan Markle's fingernail polish to some, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, that happens to me. And so, like, I will make an announcement. I will tell them, I'm going to check my phone. This should just take until Dora finds her map. Okay. And then I do it. And then they kind of hold me accountable too. So that can help you manage your glances if you are going to use glances.
Great. Thanks for that, Katie. So some discussion about glancing or kind of needing a distraction, like a book, that sort of thing. When nursing and when breastfeeding, I think Emily, again, it is so many hours when you're breastfeeding, for sure. You're in those early days of just constantly nursing. I know when I was, I got a Kindle with my first baby because I didn't want my phone, but I still, I wanted to read. So I don't know if I was right or wrong, or if there is a right or wrong, but do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I want to my approach always, and like, Faith, you've read the book, is like, you are the expert in your baby and you're the expert in that relationship. And all I can say, and all I ever want to say is to listen to self and like to watch the child and to notice when they're noticing you, and make sure that you're not so engrossed in something that you can't notice them get your attention, or like notice the way that they when they begin reaching for your nose, or when they begin trying to grab your bottom lip. Oh my goodness. Those things are really, something really powerful is actually happening. And so we just want to say, like, you know, your children, your baby's eyes are built like, do you know, I mean, I'm sure y'all all know this, that like literally in your DNA somewhere is written the distance between your eyeballs and your nipple, and that is exactly how far your kid can see when they're born. That's insane. Like, that's insane. Like, this kid is learning, like, is inborn with just the perfect ability to see your eyeballs. You know, that's amazing. So we just like want to, that's all I ever say is like, yeah, if you got to use your Kindle, if you got to take care of yourself, take care of yourself, but remember that they're looking and they're doing something important. And it's just sad to me when parent education is in a state where maybe somebody wasn't just taught that, you know, like they weren't taught that like that gaze really is important. So they don't even know that they need to find balance there, you know. How's it going in the chat, guys?
Yeah, so there was another comment that just came in about phone time with having differences with what priorities a partner might have, and
God,
approach
that's so hard.
supervising independent play when kids are getting a little bit older. You know, being in COVID and quarantine, like sometimes after a day, play a game or something on your phone, and you're supervising some independent play versus maybe another partner who wants to be more engaged. So what might be some tips for communicating?
So the question is, the partner wants to be more engaged and let you play on your phone for a little while?
I think so. Summer, do you want to chime in?
Yeah. It's actually the reverse. Like when our son's playing, we've got sort of a like fenced off play area, and he's, you know, playing with blocks, chewing on blocks, throwing blocks, whatever comes first, you know, he's little. And I guess like what you were saying about sort of glancing at things, for me, if I'm in that space with him and I'm kind of supervising that play, I don't necessarily feel like I have to be constantly like facilitating these blocks. That's right. What I'm saying. But I want to feel present in that space with him. But I am an extrovert. I definitely thrive off of connections with people, even with my 20-month-old. My husband is an introvert, and that is extremely taxing for him. And I know even with a 20-month-old, you know, it's not just the, you know, the sort of, I hesitate to say this word because it has a negative connotation, but the relentlessness of parenting, especially right now, is what is very difficult, because any one action is not really difficult. It's just the relentlessness of it.
Yes.
But his, you know, for him, I know that he needs that mental break. So he'll play Sudoku or he'll do this or that. And I think, you know, there's perhaps a broader issue just in terms of how we both view that kind of technology. But I also know that if I go in there and try to like mandate that he not do that, his brain is going to explode. You know, we're going to And it's a struggle for me because we definitely view that differently.
Yeah. So it sounds though, is your name Emily? Is that right? What is it? Summer. It sounds like, Summer, that you have a good head about it, and that you're thinking about it, and that there is so much, like, even so maybe what I want you to hear is I want you to hear an expert saying, like, there's just so much grace here, and like it's going to be okay, and like you're thinking about it, and that's the best you can do. And like, and so often the kind of cult of the Instagram expert, like I call it, and like these people who, like how I start my book, Parents Deserve Accurate Information. It's like, you do. And there's so many people out there that come so hard at this issue. And I want to just make sure you haven't heard me come too hard at this issue. Like, keep just in conversation, make sure that you're working as hard as you can to kind of create that balance and of just what they need, but also self-care is just so huge. And it sounds like you're tending to the fact that your husband also has like different self-care needs than you. And so I always recommend, like, whenever you read expertise, new research, or you encounter an expert that has a different line of thought, to just wonder with your spouse over those things. Like, I wonder what this would look like. I wonder what this new research looks like in the way we parent, and just like beginning to wonder those things together, because there's so much grace and there's nothing I'm going to tell you that's like, oh, you better get in there and tell him to, blah, 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 blah. We're not going to do that. Yeah.
So much for that, Katie. I think that's super, super helpful. Hopefully that helped a little bit. I know we have lots of conversations about introversion and extroversion, because we're introverted and our kiddos are not, and they talk like even the 17-month-old. There's just so many words, and it's exhausting. And so trying to find those ways that we both can recharge at the end of but wanting to also engage with our kiddos is super, super challenging.
I'm excited for you though, Faith, because I think that is the stuff that makes kids great. When a parent says, this is who you are. Oh my goodness, I love who you are. It is so different than who I am. That's wonderful. Can we learn to love each other in our differences? That's to me, I love it. I love it. I'm excited. Even though I know it's a challenge, I'm excited for the conversations you're going to have when they're 8 and 10 and 16. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know our time is kind of winding down. So if anyone has questions or comments for Katie, please feel free to share in the chat. Katie, do you have anything that you want to share?
I've loved being with y'all, and you can always, I hope that y'all will buy my book. I hope that you'll share my book. I hope that you'll reach out to me on Instagram or email me or any kind of follow-up. I'm around. I'm obviously I'm going to leave here and I'm going to go check on a team of people who are pulling a tree out of a hospital right now. Like, that is happening. So, whatever. But I would love to hear from you anyway. So.
You would think we would know by now. I put Katie's Instagram in the chat. I think Azetta shared the link to your book in our attendee RSVP email that went out earlier today. So highly recommend it. Starts at 12 months old all the way through 4. So it's perfect for me with both ends of the spectrum. So we've got about, a good intro and then a good portion of that being a workbook, which is really, really helpful. So again, thank you all so much for your time, and thanks, Katie. We really appreciate it. Azetta, do you have any last words before we all pop off?
Well, I like all this praise I'm getting. Let's just keep it going. Thank you. Good stuff. Oh my goodness. I'm getting my ego needs met. All right. Thank you guys. And Faith, it is so good to see your sweet face. Oh my goodness. You still have the same love and spirit that you had whenever we were kids. I love it.
Oh, I know. So good to see you and chat in person, not just seeing all your Instagrams and hearing you all. And so proud of the work you're doing. Thanks so much.
All right.